Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 88, Kissing Cousins. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Fran's cousin is getting married, and Fran doesn't have a date for the wedding. She and Val go to a singles bar where they run into Cece, who pretends that she's only there for a tall black Russian. Fran responds that she would settle for a short tan Jew, catching the attention of ENT Bob. On their first date, Bob and Fran connect really well, leading her to announce at breakfast the next morning that she found the man she's going to marry. Still, Fran declines to bring Bob to her cousin's wedding because she recognizes that meeting the entire family would be a huge turnoff. Walking down the aisle as a bridesmaid at the wedding, Fran is paired with Bob. Immediately after they kiss each other in greeting, they learn that they are, in fact, cousins. Fran tries to drown her romantic troubles in pound cake, only for Maxwell to get down on one knee and make a life-changing proposal. No, it's not marriage, unfortunately. Instead, it's therapy. Fran has her first session with Dr. Miller and explains to Maxwell that she's now done jumping on his desk in a tight little skirt. She's done parading around the house in cute little crop tops, and she's done wiggling around in bikinis on the beach. In short, she is no longer dressing for men. When this depresses Maxwell, Fran declares that therapy's working, Val. Meanwhile, Cece tries desperately to shake an overly friendly Val who wants to understand why she doesn't like her. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us to scene 1 in the living room?
Yes. So we are in the Sheffield living room, and Fran's standing on something, so she's a little bit higher up. I didn't quite catch what she's standing on. Did you?
It looked kind of like a trunk, but I didn't pay very close attention to it.
Yeah, because Sylvia's there and she has, needle in hand, and Fran is wearing what is obviously a bridesmaid's dress.
Yes.
And I think this might be an appropriate time to kind of mention what it looks like.
Oh, yes.
So it's kind of like a lilac color, shiny, and there's ruffles at the top. And then I think like it's kind of like an A-line skirt, right?
I would describe it more like a ball gown skirt.
Okay.
It's clearly very round.
It's more, it's more voluminous.
Yes.
And Fran's expression shows how she's not pleased with this. She doesn't think it looks good, but yeah, it's like one of those classic what you think of unflattering bridesmaids dresses, but it's not actually, I don't think it's that unflattering, but whatever.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Clearly though, Fran is displeased, and I think part of it is she wearing the hat right now or no?
No,
okay.
Not yet.
Okay, well, but Sylvia's there obviously trying to help with the fitting of the dress. And again, Sylvia's like, will you stop it already? Nobody's going to be looking at you. You're the bridesmaid, not the bride. And Fran's like, that's a sentence you can't hear often enough.
Right.
And Niles walks in and he's asking, Sylvia, did you say you want waffles or pancakes? And Sylvia's like, I said, and. So waffles and pancakes.
Right.
Brighton walks through and he makes a kind of snide comment about the dress, how, when is she going to get the sheep to match? And then Sylvia makes a comment about, like, if you want fashion advice, take a cue from me. And she kind of gestures to herself. Debbie, would you mind describing the outfit that Sylvia's wearing?
Sure, but I'll also, before I do that, I'll mention that she doesn't just gesture to herself. She like adjusts her breasts to like move on. So she's in these hot pink, like magenta pink pants, a neon green shirt, and then over it, a long sleeve neon green and black zebra print button down that's open.
Yes. And so, of course, at this point, Maggie and Gracie come in. Maggie's laughing at Fran, but then she tries to kind of like cover up by saying, Gracie, stop laughing.
Right.
And Maggie, in a totally unconvincing way, is like, oh, that's a cool dress and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And she walks away, and Gracie's left, and Gracie's like, well, we won't need to clear space for her Academy Award.
Right.
And then she then asks Fran, Fran, when you get married, can I be your flower girl? And Fran's like, sure, if like you're still feeling that way at 40.
Right.
um, Niles then comes in with the waffles and pancakes. And Sylvia asks, she holds up the syrup bottle and is like, don't you have this in light? And Niles just kind of says, oh, Sylvia, like the barn door has been open and the horse has already left the stables at this point,
Right.
essentially saying, you're already eating pancakes and waffles. So what's the difference? Light versus regular syrup. So anyway, Sylvia starts eating and Fran comes over and starts eating as well. And that is the opening scene. Do you have anything to add?
I just want to comment. So Sylvia goes and starts to eat, and Fran is still up on the little pedestal, and she tries to get her mother's attention. She doesn't. She's not successful. So she lifts the skirt, and we see it's a giant hoop skirt,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing
Yeah.
underneath it. It's basically like as if she had a very large hula hoop embedded in the bottom of her skirt.
Mm-hmm.
And so we like see her legs, and it's just comical.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So in scene 2, we are in a bar, and we see Fran and Val are sitting together, and Fran's lamenting that she wishes that she could dance like that. And Val's like, you mean swing? And Fran's like, no, I mean with a man. And Val's like, well, if you really want to dance, I'll dance with you. And Fran's like, I've never pictured swinging with you. And Val's like, really? You never have that fantasy? Val's like, and Fran's like, no. And Val quickly is like, oh, me neither, me neither.
Mm-hmm.
And so Fran starts lamenting then how she doesn't have a date for her cousin's wedding. And so she asks Val, what are you doing Saturday? And Val's like, oh, all of a sudden I'm good enough for you. And Fran's like, I'm really surprised that we haven't been picked up yet. I mean, look around. Have you ever seen such a bunch of pathetic, desperate women? Oh, hi, Miss Babcock. And, they've spotted Miss Babcock, who's, disappointed, I guess, that they've seen her. She
Mm-hmm.
awkwardly says hi. And they're like, oh, what a surprise running into you. And she's like, oh, well, I'll try anything once. And then her cover is immediately blown by the bartender, who asks, Cece, your usual?
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, oh, it's all right. Come on. We're all here for the same reason. And Cece kind of goes over to the bar on the other side of Fran. She's like, well, speak for yourself, Nanny. Fine. I'm just here for a tall black Russian. And Fran's like, oh, well, I'd be happy with a short tan Jew. And then Cece gets her drink and she's about to leave. And they're like, wait, where are you going? Hang out with us. And Fran's like, just because I work with the kids all day, that doesn't mean that I can't engage in intelligent adult conversation. So Cece sits. And then Fran immediately harpoons herself by saying, so when was the last time you had sexola?
Mm-hmm.
And Cece downs her drink real fast. And Val's like, oh, the next one's on me, Miss Babcock. And Cece's like, well, thank you, Val. And Val's shocked. You know my name? Of course I know your name, says Cece. And Val's like, but you never call me Val. I always thought you hated me, but everyone told me I was being stupid. And Cece's like, well, don't listen to other people. You were absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
At which point, a handsome, young, short tan Jew comes over and says, excuse me, ladies, which one of you ordered the short Jew? And all of them are like, oh, me. Because again,
Mm-hmm.
he's attractive. And he's like, no, this woman had a very distinctive voice. And Fran's like, hi. And she focuses on her nasal voice. And he's like, wow, you must have really deformed adenoids. And she's like, that's your idea of a come on? And she turns around and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a doctor. She turns back around, come on, with a big smile.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Okay, so I'm assuming we're keeping under wraps who the
We
short Jew is.
can,
can.
I mean, it's up to you. Well, his name is Bob, and he is, as we find out, his name is Bob. And he is played by someone rather famous.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so I guess I'll take us to the living room. And Fran and Gracie are sitting on the couch, and Fran is finishing up reading a story, saying how Snow White and Prince Charming live happily ever after. Side note, isn't Prince Charming out of Cinderella?
Oh, I don't know. Aren't they all named Prince Charming?
I thought Snow White was just the prince. But anyway,
Well, he is charming and he's a prince, so it doesn't matter.
yes. So Gracie, like Fran seems very satisfied with the ending, and Gracie says, this story really screws with women's heads. And Fran's like, huh? And Gracie's like, what are the women out there supposed to do who look more like grumpy and dopey? And Fran's like, that's why they sell Clinique.
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell walks in at that, just then, and he asks, oh, Miss Fine, where are you off to? Because Fran is dressed up and she's kind of getting ready, and she says she's seeing an ear, nose, and throat man.
Right.
And Maxwell's like, oh, you finally heard yourself on a tape recorder, huh? Well, now you know what we have to live with day in and day out. And then like she's giving him a look, and he finally realizes, oh, you meant seeing him socially, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, I may have a funny voice, but at least I ain't the one sitting home alone revisiting Brideshead.
Right.
And Maxwell, so, Miss Fine, who's this Bob fellow like? What's this Bob fellow like? Side note, so she never mentioned Bob in this conversation.
I know.
So how does he know? And why did if he knew about Bob, then why did he say the previous stuff? Anyway,
Correct.
moving on. And Fran's just saying how adorable Bob is, and you're gonna love him. And Max was like, well, the important thing is if you love him. Do you love him, Miss Fine? Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously now in concern. And Fran's like, don't be ridiculous. It took me 3 years to fall in love with you. Whose chocolate beverage? Moving
Mm-hmm.
on. Side note. Do you really do you really think it took 3 years?
No.
No. Anyway.
But it took 3 years to admit it both ways.
Yes.
I mean,
Okay.
yes, she said she loved him when she was going under anesthesia in like season 1 in Deep Throat, but she was under anesthesia and she was just saying, I love you to everyone and everything in the room. So that doesn't count.
Okay. At this point, Niles comes in and says that he just saw, the young man with an $80,000 Porsche. And Maxwell's like, is it a convertible? And, it's not. And he's like, well, mine's a convertible. And Niles
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, yes. And with that cute window Garfield on it.
Yep.
So doorbell rings. Not Bob's there. And Fran kind of looks up and says, you can't park there. And he's like, I'm a doctor. I can park anywhere. And Fran's like, oh, you mean like the red zone in front of Ben and Jerry's? And he's like, and even the fire hydrant in front of Loman's. And like Fran gets like a really, like she's obviously in love with that idea. And Niles, who is holding a laundry basket, pulls out a red towel, hands it to Maxwell and says, you can go ahead and throw it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Maxwell asks about Bob's car, like, why isn't it a convertible? And Bob's like, oh, well, doesn't that seem kind of like a midlife crisis thing to you? And Niles is just laughing. He's like, and Maxwell gives him a look, and Niles starts looking through the basket of laundry. Oh, there's nothing in here to get me out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, Bob's now focused on Fran, asking her where she was 10 years ago. And she's like, at my sweet 16 party. And both Niles and Maxwell burst out laughing, and Fran gives them a look.
Yep.
And then Bob asks Fran, I hope you like lobster. And, they head out. And so it's just Maxwell and
Oh,
Niles.
wait, what does she say to him?
I don't have that written down. So
She
can you
says,
fill that in?
I hope you like a very hands-on mother-in-law.
Oh, yes. And then they leave. So Maxwell, is like, oh, Bob's, funny, handsome, personable. Um, and Niles is kind of like, and you don't worry, you have a shiny convertible or whatever. And then he like realizes that he's just, digging himself in a hole. So he asks, Sir, can I have some time off so I can see a doctor about my self-destructive behavior?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the scene. Do you have anything else to add?
I do not.
Okay.
So we miss most of the date, but we pick up in Bob's apartment, and he's like feeling her neck, and he's examining her, and he explains that, oh no, your glands don't seem swollen at all, no, you're fine. And she's like, oh wow, lobster dancing in a free checkup. And then she's like, maybe the next time I see you, you could bring some of those paper hospital robes, they're really great for when I, and she moves her hand up to her hair, dye my Easter eggs, she says.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to her, Fran, I can't believe how well we're connecting. It's like I can tell you anything. It's like and she's like, not a sister or a friend. Just kidding. I just hate when women come across so desperate. Does this place come with walk-in closets? And he's like, yeah. And then she's like, so like the mood sort of shifts a little bit. And she's like, so do you want children someday? And he's like, yes. And he's like leaning towards her. They're going to kiss. And she pulls back. Is your mother alive? No. Take me. And they kiss. And then we hear Fran's inner monologue. This guy is class plus. If I marry him, I'll be just like Alexis on Dynasty. I wonder if they have good bagels in Denver. And then we do this, we zoom into her brain in her fantasy.
Yeah.
And we see her coming down the stairs very, very, I think this is one of those times we need to talk about what people are wearing.
Yes.
Okay. Her hair is very up, but very short and kind of curly. And it's clearly very 80s. She has a face full of makeup. She's wearing a tailored red suit with very poofy shoulder pads. And she's walking in a very exaggerated fashion. And she says she's coming down the Sheffield steps. Hello, darling. And then down below is Bob. Angel, you're a vision. So stunning. Look at you, and all without a stitch of makeup. And we focus on her face, and she's wearing eyeshadow, blush, full
heavy makeup. Yeah.
Yes. Very heavily obvious makeup. And we hear her thoughts. Boy, is this a good fantasy. And then, we see Fran in the fantasy saying, Francesca, bring me my 3 precious children. And Bob is like, sweetness, you hired a new nanny? And Fran's like, yes, and she's brilliant. I just hope I can trust you around her with those tiny little skirts and stiletto heels. And then we see Francesca walk by. She's all gray. She's in what we would imagine Fran Fine would wear, red suit. Very similar to what Fran in the opening credits is wearing, a red suit with an animal pattern around the collar. And she's, again, all gray haired, and she's walking with a cane very slowly. And we hear Fran's thought, I'm no fool. The door opens, and in comes Cece and Maxwell. And Cece has her hair down. It's like a short bob, goes a little bit below her chin, and it has I don't know how to describe it, but little bits of hair on both sides of her head that are sticking
kind
out.
of a little bit like that kind of feathered look.
Is that what it is?
I don't know. It's very 80s.
Yeah, it looks even dated at that point. But and then she's wearing, I think she's wearing a gray suit with very, very big shoulders. And Maxwell is all gray, and he's in a suit. And Fran says, hello, Lalique. And as you're looking butch as always. And Cece's like, you're just jealous because I don't have to wear shoulder pads. And Maxwell pulls Fran aside, saying, I was a damn fool. It's you I've loved all along. I should have married you when I had the chance. And Fran pushes past him. Yeah, yada, yada, yada. I'm happy now. And Cece approaches Fran's like, you stay away from my husband, you gorgeous woman with the perfect figure. We then hear her thought process, which is, gee, I wonder whose fantasy this is. And the two of them go at each other, and they start wrestling. They grab each other by the shoulders. They roll over the back of the couch onto the floor. They're buttsing with each other's hair. I shouldn't say that way. They're pulling at each other's hair, saying, I hate you, or you slut, etc. And then we jump back to Bob's apartment and we hear more of Fran's thought process, which is at 29, my life is finally going to be perfect. 29, I'm lying to me now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the scene. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, you did a great job covering it.
Thank you. I also want to point out that one thing that I've never watched Dynasty, but the pronunciation of the characters in Fran's fantasy, I tried to like mimic that. I'm not sure I did it so well, but their pronunciation was different.
Very dramatic.
Yes.
Like every movement is just super dramatic.
Yes,
And like Maxwell speaks with a non-English accent.
he does. Yeah.
Um,
All right. Would you like to take us to the dining room?
yes, so we're at the dining room. It's the morning. Maxwell's there, as is Niles, and Fran walks in. She's in a robe, but her hair's nice and like an up, and she has a full face of makeup on. And she comes in very cheerfully. Raise your hand if you're in love.
Mm-hmm.
She raises her hand, and Niles is like, raise your hand if you're gonna die, a bitter, lonely old Englishman. And Maxwell gives him a look, and Niles raises his own hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then Niles offers Fran food, but Fran turns it down. She's not hungry. And they like, that's a surprise. And she's like, I know. It's like I'm possessed by a Gentile. And
Mm-hmm.
she's just so happy she's not hungry. Like she's not happy because she's not hungry, but that too. But she's just so happy she doesn't feel like eating. At this point, Cece and Val walk in, and Cece's like obviously trying to get away from Val. And Cece's like, will you stop following me? And Val's like, why? And Cece's like, because I don't want to be your friend. Oh, how can I make you understand? I don't like you. And Val's like, no, I understand that, but why? And like continues to follow Cece through the swinging door into the kitchen. Sylvia makes an appearance, and at first she's upset because she's heard like you're taking Val with you to the wedding, and Fran's like, "What's the problem? Are you worried people will think that I'm gay?" And Sylvia's like, "That I don't mind, but I don't want because it's Val. You couldn't do better than Val."
Right.
And Fran makes a comment of like, "Oh, like." Does Ellen really want to go through this? The trouble of all this. So anyway. Um, and then Sylvia turns to Niles. What's wrong with you? And she holds up a plate. Hello, because Sylvia wants to eat. And Fran announces that she's met the man she's going to marry. And then
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell's like, "Aren't you going too fast?" Or is it Niles? Niles?
I think it's
Yeah,
Niles.
Niles, aren't you going too fast? And Fran
So
at this point, yeah,
Sylvia's like, please, you don't know how old she is. She's going to be 30.
yeah, at 30, that's more than that. But at this point, Fran has the plate that Niles has prepared for Sylvia, and she kind of holds it in front of Sylvia's face, distracting her. And she's like, "Oh, there's chocolate chips in the pancakes."
Mm-hmm.
So Sylvia sits down. She also makes a show of like picking up the napkin, but not undoing it. Like it's still folded, but she like tries to put it down the front of her shirt, and everybody's
Mm-hmm.
kind of watching. And then she's asking Fran, like, well, why don't you take him to the wedding so he can meet all your family and all this stuff? And she's saying this as she's putting that napkin down the front. And Fran's like, well, you answered your own question essentially.
Did you
Um,
see what else Sylvia was doing with she tucks the napkin in, but then she was eating the pancakes. She
yeah,
wasn't
at the same
using,
time, she folds it like
yeah,
like a taco or something.
exactly. Which to me, I thought that was more that plus the weird folded napkin down the front of her shirt was what Fran was getting at than just the
Yeah, because
napkin.
like everybody's looking at Sylvia at
Yeah,
this point.
they're all looking at her like she's nuts.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
Okay. Can you take us to the Hillcrest Jewish Center?
I'd love to. So we're at the wedding, and one of Fran's relatives goes up to Sylvia and hands her a camera and says, "You should be glad your daughter's a spinster, Sylvia. This wedding cost me a fortune." And Sylvia said, "Well, that would explain why you couldn't get your hair colored." And so, like, the wedding procession is starting, and the bridesmaids are coming from one side, the groomsmen are coming from the other. They're meeting at the top of the aisle and then walking down together. And Fran and Bob are paired, and they're like, "What are you doing here?" And they kiss, and they pull
Like
apart, and
a
Sylvia stands.
big kiss, Debbie. Like,
Oh, yes, sorry, yes, I should give it like a passionate kiss.
yes.
And Sylvia stands up in the aisle and with her camera, and she's like, "Isn't that adorable? Let me get a picture of you and your cousin Bob." And Fran and Bob are just like, "Cousin, ugh."
You start
And
like kind of like spitting, trying to.
yeah, and so that's what Sylvia gets a picture of, not them smiling or standing together, but them both like trying to like clean their mouths.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
yeah, that's that. Would you like to take
Quick,
us?
yeah.
Oh,
Quick aside though,
yeah.
like, wouldn't you have thought they would have realized at the rehearsal?
We didn't see the rehearsal,
I
so
know, I know, I
okay,
know.
so
For purposes of plot, they have to meet right now.
correct.
But still, and the other thing is like, would you think it appropriate to just stop in the middle of the aisle at a wedding to like passionately kiss someone?
That to me is less obnoxious than Sylvia standing up in the aisle to take their picture.
Mm-hmm. It's yeah. Anyway, we are now in the living room in the aftermath. Fran is still wearing her bridesmaid's garb, which as she's walking down the aisle, she has added a hat to it and her hair's a bit different. But so she's still fully attired as she's sitting in the living room, obviously distraught. And Maxwell comes in and offers a spot of hot tea and pound cake. And Fran's like, "Does it have glaze on it?"
Mm-hmm.
And um, you know, it does. So she's all for it. And she starts again. Maxwell's busy like getting together the stuff, I guess. He's a little distracted because she starts on a thing of like, why can't she like find a guy? Like always something weird happens, he's a thief. Eh, It's your brother, which you don't know anything about. Moving on,
Mm-hmm.
um, it, I think she also mentioned first the tells you love them takes it back. Is
Yes, she
that correct?
does.
Yeah. Um, and anyway, so apparently Maxwell didn't hear about the brother bit because he's like does not react to it. But he finally
Correct.
comes over to her, kind of kneels down next to her, and he's like expressing how he can't take it anymore. It's time that he does something. Um, and Fran's like, "Wait a minute," like and she's looking through her clutch. I'm feeling this is going to be a memorable moment. I want my lips on.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell, she's clearly thinking it's a proposal or something. And Maxwell's like, "I think it's time they sent you to a therapist." And Fran's like, gives up on looking for lipstick. This is not a makeup moment, memorable moment. It's a pound cake moment. And she takes the pound cake and takes a bite. Yeah.
Correct.
Do you have anything to add to that scene?
No, just poor Fran.
Yes. So would you like to take us to the therapist's office?
Sure. So we're in the therapist's office and we see Dr. Miller. He's sitting there and Fran is sitting on the couch across from him. And so he asks her, why are you here? And she's like, "Well, because Mr. Sheffield's paying." End of sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Then Dr. Miller's like, "Well, who is Mr. Sheffield?" Because like this is clearly their first session. He doesn't know who anyone in her life is. She at first was not very forthcoming with information, and then that flips. "Well, he's the guy I live with, actually my boss. But he told me that he loved me, and then he took it back before anything happened, except for the time that I saw him naked, which was really an accident, like the time I woke up in bed with him. But this is not the problem." And the doctor laughs. He's like, "Oh, you're serious. Well, you know what I like to do, Fran? A little word association. I'm going to say a word and then you just tell me whatever comes to mind." And she's like, "Okay." He's like, "You'd be amazed at what we can uncover. Coffee?" And she's like, "Cake." He's like, no, it hasn't started yet. I'm just offering. She's like, what? Cake? Coffee? And he's like, no, coffee. And she's like, pass. And he's like, right, let's begin. Here's the first word, man, to which she responds, husband. Dr. Miller offers doctor. She said, and Mrs. He offers pen. She says, prenup. And he's like, we seem to be a little stuck here. Let's try opening your mind up to all possibilities. And she agrees. So he looks around his office and he has this globe and he sees the globe and he says, China. She says, pattern. He continues looking around his office. He sees his fish aquarium. He says, fish. She says, or chicken. And he's like, do you ever think of anything besides marriage? And she's like, I do. He's like, exactly. He's like, Fran, you're suffering from an obsession. Now, in order to solve this, we're going to have to work together. You'll have to come see me 3 times a week, and I'll just call my contractor and tell him to begin work on the new spa. And Fran laughs. So he tells her that you don't need a man, you need confidence. And until you start working on that, you're going to end up in an unhealthy codependent relationship like the one I had with my ex-wife. And she gets this big look on her face and looks at him and she says, you're single?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, yeah. I was going to ask, all right, would you like to take us back to the Sheffield home?
Yes. So, again, I think this is another time
Yes.
we might want to talk about what Fran is wearing.
Agreed.
Because she does have a full face of makeup on. Her hair is back, but she has like a hat, like a baseball hat perching on top of her head. And I say that because it's not quite all the way down. It's kind of like, at least how I viewed it. And then she's wearing kind of like this the shapeless kind of zip up
Like
dress that looks, sorry?
like a hoodie.
Yeah. But like it's dress length, it's not hoodie length. And it obviously is a different look than her usual look. It's more casual, again, aside from the full face of makeup. And Val, though, comes and she's wanting to hurry Fran up because, everything, if they don't get there in time, all the good ones are going to be gone. And, Fran's like, I don't need a man, whatever. And Val's just like, I was talking about the quesadillas. And, that's a good point. So at this point, though, Cece walks in and Val, of course, is like, hi, Miss Babcock. And, it turns out, that Val or Cece asks, like, oh, like you shouldn't feel afraid to call or whatever. And Val's like, yeah, I've been calling all week, but your phone's disconnected. And Cece just kind of has a look. And then Val's like, but don't worry, like Niles gave me your new number. And Cece takes the umbrella that Val has on her wrist. And she's like, oh, I need to go thank him. And anyway, I think does Maxwell come in at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. And again,
so Fran had left to go get her purse and then she comes back down and she and Maxwell now see each other.
Okay. And again, I'm sure he's asking where she's going.
Well, right? So first he asks about therapy.
Oh, yeah. And she explains that the therapist has said that she's obsessed, with getting married and and basically that, she's decided she needs to become, like independent, let that go. Maxwell, as Fran's talking, is like the man's a genius. And then, Fran's saying the therapist is also saying let go of the past. And then
forget about Maxwell what you said or didn't say or took back.
Yeah. And Maxwell's response to that is the man's a god. And he's like, and she's like, yeah, and that's why I'm no longer going to be dressing for a man, no more hopping on your desk and wearing the short skirts and tight outfits and all that kind of stuff. And you can see Maxwell's face kind of fall at this point in the conversation. And
Mhm.
then Fran's also like, and here's the bill. And then she and Val walk out the front door. And I kind of counted this next little bit as part of it,
I
like a
did too.
continuation.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of, Val and Fran are in that kind of space between the front door and the actual outside.
Mhm.
And so they're kind of looking back in to see, like, um,
So they're looking at
uh,
Maxwell, who's not looking at them.
yeah, does he look depressed? And at this point, like, Fran zips down her dress to reveal a sparkly, shiny, tight dress that is more of a Fran type of dress.
Mhm.
And, it's all part of the process. And does he look depressed? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, therapy's working.
Mhm.
So obviously, like, it's a process. That's why she's still dressing like that, even though she said she's not going to dress for a man. But she's obviously wanting Maxwell to feel kind of jealous, right? Or
She is using her therapy to try to get Maxwell to change. That is what she's doing.
yes, yes. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that scene?
No.
Okay. Can you take us back to the therapist?
Sure. So now we're at therapy with Dr. Miller, Fran, and Sylvia, and he's doing the word association game. And it's amusing how on point and how identical Fran and Sylvia's responses are. He offers
Mhm.
happy, they both say meal. He says cold, they say cuts. He says house, they say of pancakes. And he's just like, excuse me. And he picks up his phone. Yes, this is Dr. Miller. Why don't you go ahead with the imported tile for the spa?
Mhm.
And Fran and Sylvia just smile.
Yep.
And that's the
And then
episode. Oh,
yeah, well, there's like a brief
oh, yes.
ending scene where we're back at that bar slash club that we were in the first scene, and Val and Fran are wearing what they were wearing in that first scene, and they're dancing together,
Yes.
like as in like not next to each other, but actually holding on to each other
Yeah, like
dancing.
they're a swinging couple. And then Cece cuts in.
Hmm. And that's the episode.
Sorry, I didn't write down. I should have written down that they have the swing dance, but
Yeah. So, before we get into the shticks, is there anything overall you want to discuss?
no, I have some things to discuss during our shticks, so I can wait.
Okay.
How about you?
Okay. No, we can jump in.
All right. So favorite fashion, I think we need to start with the bridesmaid dress, which
Hmm.
we've already described. What did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you hate it?
Yeah, I didn't think it was that bad.
I
Um,
agree.
like I like the color. I didn't think it was terrible. I feel like was it a couple of seasons ago where we had a different bridesmaid's dress? Am I
Yes.
making that up?
Yes.
That was a
Yes. That was
lot.
season one. That was Here Comes the Brood, where Fran is wearing that pink. It's a similar cut in that it's like big and poofy, but that one was tiered and then had yellow flowers up it.
Hmm. So this is a much more flattering bridesmaid's dress. I think it's
Agreed.
I think it's the hat that kind of pushes it over. Like I could do without the hat.
Yeah, the hat seems sort of unnecessary, but it was like a similar like tulle fabric.
Hmm.
Um,
Same shade.
exactly. Um,
Did you notice her hair when she was at the wedding?
was very different. It was flat
Yeah,
and
and it seemed like she
straight.
had bangs.
Yeah, I liked her
Mhm,
hair in the first scene better, where it's her typical like curly up, mostly up hairdo. Um,
mhm,
I thought she looked great.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, like, her distaste towards it didn't quite match up with what it actually looked like.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. Um, how about what other fashion do we need to talk about?
Well, again, I know you like brighter colors, but what did you think of, Sylvia's outfit when Sylvia's like, "You should come to look take your cue from me," in
I
terms of
liked it. That was actually the next outfit on my list to discuss. Um, I like the neon colors. So
Mhm. Yeah, because I knew that you actually like those kind of colors, and in the scene itself, like, it's meant to kind of be as if, like, don't follow her
Yeah.
fashion.
But like,
And the
again, we've seen her
implication.
wear way worse things.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I don't know, like I said, it seemed kind of, like, obvious to me in the last scene, or not the last scene, but, like, the scene where Fran's gonna go out with Val again, and
Mhm.
she's wearing that hat. Like I said, it's not firmly down on her head. It's kind of, like,
A little
awkwardly on
raised.
top of it. So I'm
Mhm.
like, "That seems off." So, um, but
Well, the
yeah,
one thing
but the kind of zip-up dress itself seemed very comfortable, like, just for hanging out at home.
uh-huh. To me, it was reminiscent of like the sweatsuit we saw her in Fashion Show after she was a fashion don't. It was just like big and bulky and like looked super comfy, but not like something she would want people to see her in.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll just mention that in that scene where she's wearing the baseball cap, her hair is not its usual like big poofy, you know, Lisa Presley hairdo. Her hair is straight and she's wearing pigtails.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Did you have any other outfits you wanted to talk about?
I wanted to talk about Val's bar attire. She's wearing a hot pink button down, like silky blouse under like a black, I guess, romper. I don't talk about Val's fashion very often, but I like that. So
Mhm.
I did
Yeah.
not like Cece's bar attire. She was wearing like a leather jacket and like a turtleneck and like browns, and I was just like, not
Mhm.
very flattering.
Yeah.
Then I'm out. How about you?
Okay. I'm good to go on to notable New Yorkers.
All right. We had some this week. Not a lot, not too few,
Mhm.
but
I did have a question for you
I
in the
hope I have an
first
answer.
scene. In the first scene, Sylvia, I think, mentions, or is it Fran? Elsa Clench? Clench?
Yeah.
Is
Sylvia
that a
mentions.
okay?
Yeah. Elsa Clench was an Austrian American novelist, journalist, and television personality who's known for hosting Style with Elsa Clench weekly on CNN from 1980 to 2001. That's according
Okay.
to our friends at Wikipedia.
Did you put Academy Award down or no?
I did, but I didn't dig into it further. It's clearly an
Okay.
award or it's an award that Maggie will not be receiving for her convincing acting.
Yes, indeed. That dress is cool. Did you put what a tall black Russian is?
It's an alcoholic drink that was created in the late 1940s that has both vodka and Kahlua. And that's according to our friends at liqueur.com.
Okay. And then the big reveal, which I kind of said accidentally, but Bob is played by,
Jon Stewart.
yes, yes,
Um,
a young John Stewart.
a very young Jon Stewart. His hair is all brown and they all look so young.
Yes.
Jon Stewart, I think, is best known for his role as the host of The Daily Show. After he retired from that, he and his wife now run, or they own, an animal sanctuary in New Jersey.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think that's really cool. So
Hmm.
they have a
I've
lot of
seen
critters.
I've seen online too occasionally. I guess he has a new podcast as well, like the trouble with John Stewart, the problem with John Stewart,
Oh, I wish I
something
had
like
known.
that.
We could have invited him to be a guest on our show.
Yes, because I'm sure he would totally
I mean,
be a guest on our show.
one of his most memorable roles was clearly Bob on The Nanny.
I'm sure he remembers every detail.
Exactly. Jon Stewart, if you happen to listen to our show, we'd be happy to have you on another episode. Just reach
Yes.
out to us.
Yes,
We'll be happy to make all the arrangements.
indeed. Um, so then we have Snow White, Prince Charming, Grumpy, and Dopey.
Fairy tale, all reference to a fairy tale of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. Grumpy and
Yes.
Dopey are two of the dwarves.
Yes. Clinique is Clinique.
An American cosmetic company that is a subsidiary of Estee Lauder Companies. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Brideshead?
Oh, It's funny because I thought I looked into that, but I don't. Oh, there it is. Revisiting Brideshead is actually a reference to Brideshead Revisited, which was a 1981 British television adaptation of the 1945 novel by the same name, which starred Anthony Andrews and Jeremy Irons. That's current our friends at Wikipedia. Those who may or may not recall, back in the episode A Star is Unborn, Maxwell commented that he went to school with Jeremy Irons. So
Okay.
it's all full circle on the Nanny.
Yeah. Apparently both Bob and Maxwell have Porsches,
Yep. Luxury, very expensive luxury cars.
but Maxwell's has a window Garfield.
Garfield, a grumpy orange tabby cat who loves lasagna and hates Mondays. That's according to me.
Yeah. We've had Ben and Jerry's before, I'm sure.
Yeah, we have.
It's an ice cream place. Loman's is all the time. Let's see.
You missed Yoo-hoo.
Oh yes.
It's a chocolate beverage that was invented by Natale Olivieri in the 1920s in New Jersey. That's according to our friends at yoohoo.com.
Not sure if you put Easter eggs at all or not.
I did not.
Okay.
But if you'd like to describe them, you can.
Yeah, well, because I knew you weren't going to put in Yiddish cop because it's
They're not Jewish?
No, you decorate eggs. Some people, like dye them. If you use like a wax and draw something on it before you put it into the dye, you can make like different patterns and stuff. Some people paint, there's different way of decorating Easter eggs. But yeah. But then we have the long kind of in Fran's mind thing about Dynasty. Specifically, she mentions Alexis.
So that's Alexis Colby, who is played by Joan Collins from 1981 to 1989, and also in 1991. She was the ex-wife of the oil tycoon on the show. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
And again, I'm sure that flashback or like that scene references a lot of stuff from the show that you and I don't know. Yeah. Yep.
So there's also a reference to Lalique on Dynasty. So I think that's a reference to Crystal Carrington, who was played by Linda Evans from 1981 to 1989. She was the former secretary and then the new wife of the oil tycoon who had been married to Alexis.
Okay. There's a reference to Ellen.
I wasn't sure if that was a reference to Ellen as in Ellen DeGeneres or...
Yeah, I assume so. Because it was all about around the gay talk. And I think she probably came out around that time.
Oh, see, I thought it was about the question of like getting married. Like, why would you subject yourself to like dealing with more family? That was how I interpreted it.
Oh, I thought it was like because of like you couldn't do better than Val kind of thing. That whole conversation. The scrutiny, I guess. I don't know. I assumed it was Ellen DeGeneres.
Okay, fair.
Did you what was your other guess?
I wasn't sure if it was like if Ellen was the name of the cousin who was getting married, since we didn't know the name of the cousin. And like why would you want to subject yourself? Like, why would Ellen want to subject herself to more familial scrutiny?
Well, I think it is Ellen DeGeneres just because I just double checked and she came out in 1997.
Oh, then yeah, that makes more sense.
Which would be like the timing for this episode, I think.
Correct. Yeah.
So yeah. Let's see here. Did we ever establish is the Hillcrest Jewish Center an actual place?
Yeah, I have it under Yiddish Cop.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Did you look up who the actor is for Jack Miller?
I did.
Okay.
I did. So his name is Spalding Gray. He was a Rhode Island native actor and writer who was known for Kate and Leopold and swimming to Cambodia. Unfortunately, he died in January 2004. And that's according to our friends at imdb.com.
Okay. Now we have also in the word association section a reference because they say house of pancakes. I'm assuming I think they're referring to IHOP, which is the International House of Pancakes.
Correct.
which is, again, a place you can get pancakes. It's a
And
restaurant.
other breakfast
And
and non-breakfast foods.
yes. Happy Meal is a reference to McDonald's.
Yep.
Um, is there any other thing you had?
I'm out.
Okay. So now we can move on to Yiddish Cup.
So I'll start with Hillcrest Jewish Center, which we've seen previously in the Cantor episode, in the Cantor show. Hillcrest Jewish Center is a real synagogue in Flushing, Queens. And according to hillcrestjc.org, it is and I quote, a traditional egalitarian congregation affiliated with the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, which seeks to foster love of Judaism and of the Jewish people through study of Torah, the performance of mitzvah, meaningful prayer, the performance of acts of chesed, which means loving kindness, and to inspire our members to engage in tikkun olam, making this world a better place in which to live. That's from their website. That's number one. Number two, kind of, you made me think of this when we were talking about how it wouldn't make sense for Fran to not meet Bob at the rehearsal dinner. And the only thing I can think of, which also doesn't make a lot of sense, is that Jewish weddings do not occur on Shabbat, and Shabbat starts at sundown on Friday and ends at after sundown on Saturday. And so the wedding is on Saturday, which means it must be Saturday night. Typically a rehearsal dinner is like the night before, so they wouldn't have been able to do that on Shabbat. So like maybe they just like abandoned that as an idea, and that's why they didn't meet there. But I don't know. Anyway, so the point I was making is maybe that's the loophole they're looking for, but it doesn't really hold too much water. But yeah, also again, Jewish weddings do not happen on Friday night or Saturday. They could happen Saturday night, but we don't get married on Shabbat. And that's because there's you're prohibited from like lumping too many simchas or good things together, because you want each one to be celebrated on its own. So
okay.
90s
And
nostalgia.
Wait, nope. There's a couple. How did you feel about Bob right away asking about lobster? How do you feel?
How could I skip that? Lobster's not kosher. Lobster's not kosher.
Now, the other thing is that in the scene where they're like doing their own version of Dynasty, when Cece and Fran are fighting, the subtitles indicate that someone says schlub. That's what I think is very hard to actually hear.
I thought she said slut.
That's what I thought too, but the subtitle said schlub.
So a schlub is a boorish and unattractive, a talentless person. That's according to our friends from Oxford Languages.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, now 90s nostalgia.
Yes, ma'am.
Obviously, Sylvia getting up with the camera to take a picture. That would be cell phones and everybody would have it.
Correct.
Unless it's a wedding where the bride and groom specifically ask people not to use their phones.
Yeah, but let's be fair, most people would ignore that anyway.
Yeah.
Especially Sylvia Fine.
Yes, that's true. You go next.
The New York City skyline with the Twin Towers.
Yep. And you're also your classic.
Old cars.
Indeed. I think too, I would think that nowadays, I would think that they would have discovered or known that they were cousins sooner.
I agree.
Through social media or the internet or whatever. It's still like if Sylvia is to the point where she knows who Bob is on sight, that's also kind of like a little bit of a mystery as to why Fran and Bob didn't even recognize each other.
Or, I mean, it's not that they didn't like recognize each other, that didn't surprise me too much. Like if you have a larger family and you don't see each other very often, which doesn't really seem to be the case for the Fine family, but like in having a discussion, they would have been able to play Jewish geography and realize they were related.
Yeah, well, and I would think given how many times Fran references like random relatives, that you would think she would have heard of Bob the ENT from her mother.
Exactly.
But yeah, so but regardless of that, I would think that first of all, at the very least, after they met, as soon as Fran would get home, she would have like looked him up online and then
Yeah.
be like, "Oh, he's friends with a bunch of people from my family. Oh, he's my cousin Bob."
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree entirely.
Hmm. Do you have anything else?
So, Fran's bridesmaid dress to me screamed 90s.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's definitely again, neither you nor I hate it or think it's like super ugly or anything, but it does seem dated.
Right. Um, Using dynasty as the basis for the fantasy, that also
Hmm.
felt dated.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Apparently, I put Fran's bridesmaid dress on my list twice because it was that 90s.
Hmm.
The old computer in Dr. Miller's office, the old phone Dr. Miller uses. Um, yeah, then I'm out.
Okay.
All right.
Um, so we do get to add to the after the thing category because it does come up in this episode. So no, we are up to 8
Yes,
this
ma'am.
season.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Do you have any future fun for us this week?
I do. So let's see. First, we're going to start with Dr. Miller. We're going to see him on 8 more episodes of The Nanny. At one point, where Fran's going to get an emergency appointment with him, and she comes in as he's having his own acupuncture session, and he comments that being drilled by needles felt oddly similar to her normal sessions.
Oh, wow.
At another point, in just a couple weeks, actually, Fran's going to run into him at the movie theater and witness him picking his nose in public. And it just sets off a whole chain reaction, which really gets bigger than one would anticipate. So that we've got that for Dr. Miller. Next week, Val and Cece are going to be able to go on a double date with each other and their respective guys. So that'll be fun. So Niles does not end up a lonely old Englishman. He actually, at the end of the series, will end up married with a baby on the way.
What?
I won't say to or with whom, but that happens. And then finally, in case anyone was curious, Fran is not done jumping up on Mr. Sheffield's desk in tight little skirts. She's also not done parading around the house in cute little crop tops. And she's finally not done wiggling around in bikinis on the beach. So in case anyone was concerned that her fashion was going to drastically change from here on out, you don't have to worry. There's nothing to lose sleep over. She's back to herself next week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for episode ratings, this week I go first.
I
And
love when you go first.
yeah, as a reminder to our lovely listeners, we rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, but they're kind of arbitrary ratings. We can always change them later on. They're just kind of how we're feeling right now, right?
Right.
So I've had a little bit of difficulty with this because I like Jon Stewart. It was cool to see him in this episode. But like, and there are moments here and there that are kind of funny, but I don't know if I necessarily like, for instance, how like it's weird to me that Maxwell's making fun of Fran's voice so much, especially like we said, it's kind of like incongruent that like he apparently has heard the name Bob. She didn't mention it in that exchange. Like, I don't know.
That's all fair.
Yeah. So I also don't like how mean they are to Val. Poor Val. I've realized that I will defend Val.
That's fine. She does need someone to defend her.
Yes. For now, I'll give it a 3.5. How about you?
Okay. So, you're right. You do point out there is some incongruity in this episode. You're right. There is some meanness to Val. You're right that Maxwell's kind of a jerk and, all of that. And yet, I'm still giving this episode a 5
Uh-huh.
because this is one of those episodes that I just enjoy watching. It's funny. It's clever. I mean, it's sort of sad and depressing on one hand, like that she found the man she's going to marry only for him to not be the man she's going to marry.
Mhm.
But I love how it goes from she thinks everything's going to fall into place to it doesn't. And then Maxwell's like, I should do something I should have done a long time ago. And she thinks, oh, this is a memorable moment. I want to have my lips on. And then she finds out it's not a memorable moment at all. It's a pound cake moment because he's not proposing. He's sending her to therapy. It's just the back and forth. I just think it's hilarious. The fashion is fun. I like this episode. So that's why I'm giving it a 5.
Fair. Yeah. And the dynasty scene is fun too, to see them acting like that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, although granted, as we said, it is sort of dated today.
mhm.
But like it's still funny. Like I
Yeah.
didn't need to watch Dynasty to know that Cece and Fran are, in the similar, they're still competing for Maxwell, even though he's now apparently married to Cece. And
Mhm.
anyway, it's fun.
Yeah.
I like this episode.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to discuss?
I do not, do you?
I do not.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 89, The Fifth Wheel.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.